I'm an ordinary man who didn't believe in ghosts and paranormal stuff. I never thought that one day I'd experience something that would make me reconsider my entire belief system. First off, I'm a military officer in a large Middle Eastern country. Due to the sensitivity of my job, I can't go into specific details about the story I'm going to tell. We had orders to camp in a specific spot within the desert and wait to execute our designated mission. The first couple of days went by, and everything seemed normal. Nothing out of the ordinary. Then we began to notice a strange man walking on nearby hills, wearing what looked like women's clothes. His walking was steady, as if he were looking for something specific. First few times we saw him, we thought he might be one of the locals or nomads and didn't think much of it. However, I sent 2 soldiers to bring him down for questioning and to warn him to keep a distance, as it was now considered a military area. But he managed to disappear and vanish every time before anyone could get near him. It became a habit seeing this weird person, and we sort of got used to watching him every day. Finally, when our mission was about to finish and we were getting ready to pack up our gear and leave. It was Wednesday, February 10th, 2010. I was in my tent trying to get some sleep when I heard the sound of gunshots coming from outside. Quickly grabbed my gun and ran out of the tent to find one of the soldiers shouting, "We got him! We finally got him, sir." I asked him nervously who he meant, but deep down I knew. He said it was that strange man we saw every day. We saw him coming down from the hills, running toward us as if he were floating above the ground, so we shot him twice in the chest. I don't know why, but I had this overwhelming feeling that something bad was about to happen. Reluctantly, I asked him to show me the body. Once we got there, I swear we both heard the sound of a man laughing loudly and giggling. When I looked at the dead body, it was a man in his mid-30s, wearing white women's lingerie and a strange necklace with an odd symbol around his neck. His face was looking directly at me, smiling as if he knew how I felt and what I was thinking. Honestly, I was freaking out but didn't show it. I had this gut feeling that we had made a huge mistake, killing this being. It was dawn, and the sun was about to rise, but I told the men to carry the body and bury it. When they finished, one of the soldiers wrote a Quranic verse on a stone, which says, "O satisfied soul, return to your Lord well-pleased, well-pleasing. Join my devotees and enter my heaven," and placed it on top of the tomb. When we all gathered around the grave to recite some Quran to ease his soul, we couldn't believe our eyes when we saw the hard stone above the grave crack in half. We all heard an angry roaring coming from inside the grave. The dirt around it was shaking heavily. This was it for me. I couldn't take it any longer, so I ordered the soldiers to grab their stuff in a hurry and get out of there. After I got back, I went to an old wise man I knew, like a shaman, tell him about this incident and find some answers. He asked me to describe the shape of the necklace the man was wearing, but refused to tell me anything further. All he said was, "You should be thankful that you got out of it safely." To this day, I still have no idea what this man was and whether he was a Jinn or a demon, but I know for sure he was not human. In the summer of 2009, my family traveled to Iraq, quite a few years after the war was over. My father hadn't seen his side of the family in over 20 years, and figured it was the perfect time for us to meet them and learn about our culture. Iraq, back in 2009, was just as terrible as you could imagine it to be. Hot and no electricity. Terror groups running around. But I was excited to explore such an ancient country. Dark history has always fascinated me. One night, my entire family walked 2 blocks down to visit my cousin at her house. I said I would meet them there because I was still getting ready. When I was done, I took 2 of my boy cousins with me. One was 4 years old, and the other was barely 2, though I had to carry him. Exactly behind our house is an abandoned house the residents of the village refer to as the Jinn house. Jinn in Arabic means genie, but not one that grants wishes. Jinns are almost always bad and do terrible things to scare or harm people. The story behind this house is that multiple families had tried to move into it, but were either scared out or a tragedy would occur that made them move out. The last tenants of the house suffered a lot. At first, it was just silly things like waking up with the TV upside down. Then, every morning, most of their furniture would be outside of the house. The youngest son began sleepwalking, and my own cousins have seen him sleepwalking to the cemetery and back at night. One night, the boy was sleepwalking, picked up a gun, and killed one of his sisters. The house caught on fire, and the family had to run out. The boy doesn't remember anything, and the remaining sister is now medically insane. Anyway, I took the two boys and started walking past the Jinn house because it was the only way I knew to get to my cousin's house. The 2-year-old was in my arms, and the 4-year-old was holding my left hand and walking with me. Walking past the Jinn house, which was on my left, I tried not to look at it because it really freaked me out. There were a bunch of broken TV sets all around the house, and all the windows were busted. But something made me look. On the roof of the house, I saw something that could only be described as having the body of a donkey, but the way it was sitting looked exactly how a cat would sit. I stared at it for probably 10 seconds when both of the little boys started to scream at the same time. The 2-year-old was facing behind me since I was holding him up on my chest, but there was no way he saw what I was seeing. I felt as though he sensed something was not right. The longer I looked at the thing, I began to notice that it had eyes that were not any color I could explain. They weren't visible in the dark, but at the same time, I saw right into them. It was like my brain couldn't process what I was looking at. It started to stand up, and that's when I picked up the 4-year-old, who was screaming bloody murder, and ran as fast as I could away from that thing. I didn't tell any of my family about what happened because I didn't want to remember what I saw or let my brain process the memory any more than I already had. I know what I saw, and I feel like it's something above human understanding. Whatever I saw that day, I know that in the moment of looking at it, it was shifting its form. It was not solid, like you and I. Its shape was constantly changing while remaining the same. It didn't have to show itself in its entirety for me to see what it was. I know it doesn't make any sense, but I truly believe I saw something that is not from this world, and that's why I had trouble understanding what I was seeing. It's been 6 years since then, and I ended up moving to Iraq the year after this happened. I've gone back to the house multiple times, but I haven't seen the figure since that day. I still feel a presence, even though it's been abandoned for years. I've seen some really weird things here, and I don't have logical explanations for anything I've seen so far. This strange experience happened when I was at university in Jordan. I lived in an all-girls dormitory and had my own room. I've always been the type to dream almost daily, and I dream of all kinds of random things. But I started to experience a new kind of dream while living in those dorms. To be honest, they felt like very realistic dreams because I would always be in my room with everything looking exactly the same, as though I randomly woke up at night. But there would be figures that in my head I knew were jinns. Times, it was the shape of a man or woman sitting on the edge of my bed just watching me. Another time, it was 3 women hanging upside down in the corner of my ceiling with long hair flowing down and glowing eyes. It was always the same, with me still in my bed, just witnessing these creepy figures around me. My mind would always tell me that clearly this was just a dream, but it was a dream I'd only ever experience in that particular room. There were also times when I'd feel someone touching me when I was in bed, yet no one was there. Sometimes a breath on my ear, and I'd always deny it to myself and try to explain it away. I didn't think much of it until one Ramadan when we were having a group iftar on the roof of our dorms. We had a big communal area there where we'd throw parties or movie nights and other get-togethers. As we were chatting as a group, Jinn stories became a topic of discussion. One girl decided to talk about these strange dreams she'd been having recently, and that they only happened when she was at the dorm, not at home. She literally described the exact same dreams I'd been having. That's when I felt really creeped out and mentioned that I was experiencing the same thing. Another girl admitted to experiencing it too. We later found out that our rooms were directly above or below one another, and that there had been a fire that burnt part of the building down many years ago. It had been abandoned for the longest time and was only recently fixed and made into a girls' dormitory. I honestly don't know what the connection is, but we had no explanation for what was happening. I ended up changing rooms and never experienced those strange dreams or the Jinn molestation or whatever it was again.